We recently got some important new information on Baldur's Gate 3 when Larian founder and CEO Swen Vincke joined Drop Frames for an hour-long interview. I want to cover some highlights of the interview, including more details on release time, origin characters, reactivity, gameplay, and more. Be sure to check out the full interview on Drop Frames for all the details. With the release date of August 3rd cleared up several days ago, players began to wonder what time the game would release. Well, now we know it's releasing 10 a.m. Pacific Time, 1 p.m. Eastern. Well, for now at least. Swen mentioned there's a possibility this could change. An interesting note here is that Larian actually wanted it earlier in the day, but Steam asked for the later release. Steam wants to be sure they have people in the office to be able to support any issues that may come up during launch. As for the technical state of the game, Swen mentioned the game is done and they are in a good spot right now. They're just working through fixing some minor bugs, but overall, the build is locked and he seems pretty happy with where they are. This isn't to say it's going to release bug-free, since the game is massive and there's so much reactivity, but it seems to be becoming fairly polished. So the game is releasing in what sounds like a good state at 10 a.m. Pacific on August 3rd, but what about preloads? Well, Swen was non-committal and says Larian doesn't have a plan for preloads finalized yet. And for those who have early access downloaded already, it does sound like it's going to be a full reinstall. He mentions there's so much new stuff in the game since early access that updating really won't save you much time. Also, for Steam Deck owners, Swen mentioned they are actively working on Steam Deck verification. They have a team dedicated to working on this, and it probably won't be verified for release, but it should be soon after. It seems like it will at least be playable at release until it is fully verified. The next big piece of news Swen gave us is some more information on origin characters. Swen mentioned he actually wouldn't recommend a first playthrough with an origin character, especially the Dark Urge. His recommendation is actually for a custom character on the first playthrough. This is pretty big news, as I've seen lots of people talking about playing through with an origin character, and even more saying they were going to go with the Dark Urge on a first playthrough. Now, this doesn't mean you can't play with an origin character on your first playthrough. You definitely can. It's just that Swen personally thinks they're best after players have already experienced them as companions, and Larian's intention was for the origin characters to help with replay value. In the case of the Dark Urge specifically, he mentioned you can get dramatically different parts and perspectives of the story, but they really have the most impact after you've already seen the story once, so you can tell what changes. I always had a hard time picking a custom character over an origin character because I felt like I was missing out on part of the story or some content. And it sounds like you actually might, but it's nice to hear that a custom character is a completely viable option. It also shows how much work they've put into making this game fresh for players on a second playthrough, where you're going to see things from a different perspective using an origin character. Speaking of companions and origin characters, Swen went on to say that they can be respect into whatever you want them to be. However, with a few caveats. One or two companions aren't able to change their subclass, and for all companions, their original class will be used for story purposes. For example, if your companion is a rogue, the game will always think of them as a rogue throughout the story and dialogue. We also got some more information on reactivity throughout the game. A player's class and race choice can affect certain parts of the game, with certain combinations changing the game more than others. Larian had a team dedicated to specifically working on reactivity in the game. Swen does go on to say, not every class will see a major change to story and gameplay, but certain ones, like the Druid, can see things other classes wouldn't. But every class will feel like you are actually playing that class for role-playing purposes. In the game, if you are a barbarian, you will actually feel like a barbarian, a rogue will feel like a rogue, and so on. With all of the different reactions, Swen jokes that this is not a game for completionists, as there are so many different paths a player can go down. Certain sequences, in just the right order, will trigger different scenes and dialogues that wouldn't be there otherwise. They do have systems in place to ensure you will always see the critical parts of the game, but there is a chance one player could have a completely different experience from another based on the choices they made throughout the game. With all of the different available paths, and players seeing different parts of the game, Swen is a little worried about reviews. He mentioned this is such a hard game to review due to all of the permutations. It also doesn't help, the review time is compressed due to the earlier release, but he says that's a sacrifice they are willing to make. Larian's focus is making games they actually enjoy and want to play, and he says he's happy with the game and really proud of what the team has created. We also got some more details around gameplay. Sven mentioned dodge and ready actions are not part of the game, and gave a big piece of information in mentioning that players will not be able to roll for stats. Rolling for stats was actually planned to be in the game, but was ultimately cut during development. It was mentioned that resting was also changed during development as well. Originally, Larian intended to limit the ability to rest and had several areas of the map where rests weren't allowed. However, playtesters didn't like this, and Larian significantly cut back on the no rest areas. Sven cites combat as the reason for this. Their combat is so finely tuned that after encounters, players were often lower in health and wanted to rest. Again, there are still some areas where players can't rest, but it's less than they originally intended. We also got some answers around conversations and how they work. The player who initiates a conversation will drive the conversation, but other characters can help with skill checks. For example, a companion can cast guidance on a player to try to help with a check. In multiplayer, other players can suggest what should be said. However, with all of this, in critical conversations, the ones that can seriously alter the game or world, all players will be able to contribute to the conversation. To wrap up, Sven spoke a little bit about the inspiration for the game and some post-release plans. He mentioned Ultima 7 is a huge inspiration and has been throughout his career. He credits Ultima 7 for being the game that made him fall in love with games, and he loves the way it rewards exploration. And he actually got that feeling of playing Ultima 7 while exploring the city of Baldur's Gate in a recent playthrough. As for post-release plans, the team is currently focused on shipping the full game, but they do have an idea about what's next. After the game releases, it will have mod support, and Sven vaguely hinted at additional Baldur's Gate 3 content coming in the future. Does this mean DLC? I guess we'll have to wait and see. With the game so close to release, it was great seeing Sven come out and provide some additional information and answer some questions fans still had about the game. There's a lot we still don't know, but with only a few days left until release, we'll find out a lot more soon. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.